the US elections in 2024. Is Trump going to come back triumphantly? Are the Democrats going to take it? Or is there going to be some kind of unexpected event, some kind of disruption to the whole elections, as been rumored already? So, in order to find out about this and to decode and unveil what we can know through the stars, we're going to look into the astrology of US politics and US elections 2024. Let's do this. 2024 is such an important year with the US election coming up, but it's not just the US. There is a record number actually of countries that have elections coming up this year. So we can see a shift in the entire political landscape, globally speaking. Now, this also plays into the theme of Pluto in Aquarius, which is a long-term transformation, a long-term process that has just started in 2024, and of which we will just see the first initial glimpses in 2024. I'm going to make a whole other video on Pluto through Aquarius on this channel. So make sure you subscribe and follow if you don't want to miss that. Hit the notification bell as well. But just in a nutshell, this transit, or this global mundane transit of Pluto in Aquarius, it's about the deep transformation and potentially the death of political systems that we have right now in place. So in our case, that means the demise of liberal democracy, which has kind of outlived its time, and it's going to be replaced by something else. The question is it going to be replaced by the Great Reset, and what the acolytes of the Great Reset have in mind, which is a surveillance system, a complete surveillance system? Or is it going to be replaced by something much more empowering? That's going to be the challenge, the political challenge of the many coming years. But back to the US election, this is such an important, pivotal event because we going to see a lot of the challenges, the dynamics, the struggles of this bigger confrontation that I just mentioned. We're going to see that play out in the US elections. Now, there's a couple of charts that we want to look at. There's always a lot of charts astrologically. There's always a lot of transits and constellations going on that we could look at. So we always need to make certain choices. But I have selected a few here which are important for us to understand and to know. And obviously, there's lots of other things. There are Aries ingress, and there's lots of other things happening which I have looked at, which I continually look at, which I'm not showing you here right now. But here are some things that you should pay attention to. So the first thing is we have a couple of important hits on the US chart that I want to show you. So when I say the US chart, what does that mean? Well, you see, just like a person has a chart, a country also has a chart, right? So just like a person has a birth chart, the country has a birth chart too. When does that happen? Well, in the case of the US, if you've ever been to America, you will know that people celebrate the Independence Day or the birthday of the nation on July 4th. Actually, so let's actually look at this chart here. So actually, the U.S. independence chart, which is for July 4th of 1776, right? It is basically calculated for the time at which the U.S. independence and the statehood of the U.S. was proclaimed. And actually, there's an interesting fact around this, or an interesting story around this. The founding fathers, a good number of them, including George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, they were very well versed in astrology. And, they had the whole background from the Rosicrucian kind of order and the Hermetic kind of initiation sciences that they knew about. And that being the case, they actually delayed the foundation of the US by a couple of days so that they could get a better chart for the US. They made up some story. They didn't come and say, I want a better chart. They just, made up something to get a few extra days until they could get what they felt was a better chart for the birth of the nation. So that tells you that it's, people know about this, even though it's been, not very, even though it's not been very kind of widely accepted for the last, few hundred years in popular culture, but people do know about this, and people have been knowing about this for a long time, right? So, okay, so let's look at the chart, the US chart. Give me a moment here to fix this. Okay, so let's look at the US chart, right? So just briefly, the chart tells you about the general characteristics of the nation. I'm not going to go too much into this right now, just this much that, you've got this very strong 7th house or 7th zone here with Jupiter, Venus, and Sun, but also Mars. So this is a nation that is very much focused on partnerships with globally with the Sagittarius ascendant, right? Going out there into the world as a missionary, right? Being a missionary for the rest of the world, bringing the rest of the world democracy or whatever the case may be, whatever the story, is that is being told internally and externally. And this nation, is capable of doing great partnerships with others. So you got the Jupiter, Venus here, very, partnerships that bring a lot of wealth with other nations, but also the Mars is here. So there's also a very bellicose kind of approach to others. And the Uranus is also on the descendant. So, there's also a lot of unpredictability, and it could always, things could always turn into a war with others, basically, right? With other nations that the US engages in. And now, so again, don't want to go too much into the chart. This is a whole other kind of exercise if we were to try and just understand the character of the nation. We could, I'm probably going to do a series on that, or some videos specifically on that, where we will look at a couple of different nations and their charts and what it tells us about these charts, or about these nations rather. But what I will show you, what I want to show you, is what you should see now, right? So let me see this. Can you see this? Yeah, I'm just going to move my image here a little bit. So here's the US chart, and what I'm showing on the side is, this is outside rather, is the transits, right? So the transits, the current world transits. You see February 29th. This is for February 29th, and we're able to move them, and then once we move them, we can see what activations we have, okay? So let me show you what I mean here. You see, I'm moving this, and then you see the activations that we have, right? So just like as a person, you have transits, a state has transits too, a company has transits too, right? A company, a state, this is why you could use it for business too, whole nother conversation. But okay, you see, so now let's go to the transits. So when we look at the transits, we've got some important stuff happening this year in the US chart, in the US transits, right? So what is this? What am I talking about? So we've got the Jupiter-Venus conjunction coming up in May, around April, May, right? Which is going to be this big burst of technological innovation and, the explosion of markets, crypto markets, and others. I did a whole other video on that. This is happening in April and May, right? And while this is happening, this is going to affect, this falls in the US 5th house, and it's got a nice relationship. It's got a nice trine, and here sextile with the US Venus, and with the US Neptune, and the US Mercury here. So you're going to see this here and here, okay? And this is going to be experienced through very, lots of fertile innovation coming out of the US, obviously, right? I mean, It's the leader still in innovation and technology in every way. But then shortly after this burst of innovation, we're going to have here the Uranus. You see here Uranus? Uranus is squaring the moon here. See this? Uranus squaring moon. So the transiting Uranus is squaring the moon. Moon, what is that? In mundane astrology, or in, mundane means basically looking at states and companies. In the mundane charts, moon stands for the people, the populace, right? The well-being of the populace. And the people, the moon is in Aquarius. So you have a people that is freedom-loving. Aquarius is about freedom, right? So you have a nation whose people are very freedom-loving. That's who they are, right? That's the definition of what it means to be part of the American people. And Uranus, which is about sudden changes, right? Sudden changes and kind of breakthroughs and breaks, and negatively speaking also kind of breaks with the existing order, is squaring the moon, right? So this is a very significant process that happens. And Uranus squaring the moon in August, it means that we're going to see a upsurge in upheavals, in unrest. It basically stands for a time in which the popular sentiments are under attack, and they're going to shift a lot of big shifts in popular sentiments. Okay? So this image, it really stands for a shift in popular sentiments. Now, if you look back to when this happened, sometimes it's a good idea to just look at the previous transits of a constellation that you're looking at. So if we go back, you see, when was this hit last with the hard aspect of Uranus on the US moon? And you'll see here, this was end of 2001, early 2002, so around September 11th, right? When the terror attacks happened and the whole kind of mood and the whole national character of the US completely changed, right? This was the last time. And when did it happen before that? If you go to the previous hard aspect, you will see it was in 81, so just 81. So this is basically when Reagan came into power, and when people were extremely upset with the previous Carter government and with the economic situation, and there was this big shift that happened, and a new kind of system came into power. And he says, so anyways, you could go back and you could check the cycles. There's just a certain cycle, cyclical laws to history, which people are not aware of yet enough. This is a completely, untapped science yet. Few people are really looking at this. But what does it mean that we're going to have a Uranus square to the US moon this year in 24? So upheavals, unrest. Specifically, when you look at the signatures, it doesn't necessarily always have to be something horrible, right? It just means a shift, a big shift in the national moods. But if you look at the rest of the signatures that are there at play as well, this time this could get very, let's say, bumpy, right? So public unrest. If you look at the situation with the immigrants or the migrants who are kind of flooding the country, and if you look at already some states like Texas famously recently defying the federal dictum or the federal commands that came from the central government, you see there's a lot of tension there already going on between the different states and with the people and the government. And all of this is going to still boil up a lot in summer, right? So summer is when this is going to be at a peak. Summer is basically August. This is August, right? July, August of this year. We're going to see these sentiments, upheavals, unrest. This is going to start in summer, and then it's going on, it's just going on all the way to the elections. And simultaneously, you have Jupiter here transiting on the US Mars in 7, right? So the US Mars in 7 is about kind of having that very, fighting kind of attitude or bellicose attitude with regards to their foreign partners, right? Or with regards to also foreign adversaries. And this means basically just in the buildup of the elections, the U.S. government and leaders, they're going to feel extremely emboldened to go out there and be much more outspoken and aggressive with adversaries. So you put these two things together, and also Uranus is also another interesting thing. Uranus stands for electricity, electrical shocks, and kind of bursts of electricity. So when you put this together here with the moon tension, you have also an image of potentially, what a lot of people have been talking about, what could potentially happen is that the grid goes down, right? So you have, let's say you have these elements, put them together. In the buildup towards the elections, you're going to see much more aggression, foreign aggression, right? You're going to see much more upheavals and unrest in the country, and you're going to potentially have disruptions with electric systems, right? Potentially disruptions with the grid or infrastructures. All of this is written in the astrology before and going into the elections in the 2024 buildup. Okay, so now, what does that mean for the incumbent? What does that mean for the contender? What does that mean for the candidates that we have? Now we need to look at the charts of these folks to see what is written in the stars for them. So let's do that. Let's start with Joe Biden, the nice elderly gentleman. I shouldn't say nice, he's kind of a criminal as well, but okay. So his family, has been involved in all kinds of unsavory deals and all kinds of crooked things. But okay, let's see. What is he going to do? Is he going to, obviously he's facing a lot of backlash right now for people just not being willing to put up with a demented, senile, very blatantly incapable person who's not running the show. Everybody knows he's got to have some earpiece who's running the show because he's just not mentally there anymore. But he's got, in his transits, he's got you see here, this is his transit, this is Biden's transit. He's currently going through Saturn square Saturn. This is right now, right? Saturn square Saturn. So Saturn square Saturn, which is, what does that mean? That means facing the consequences of old age. Facing the consequences of age. That's Saturn, right? Saturn is Senex, is the old, is age, Chronos, right? Is age. And when you have hard Saturn aspects, like Saturn return, Saturn square Saturn, Saturn opposition Saturn, those are times of reckoning with your age, right? Okay, pretty clear. There's no surprises here, right? And it depends on if you're there. Those are also times when you kind of very visibly and clearly shift up one level. So when you have a Saturn return, that happens around your age 30, then you're, okay, now I process this and now I'm going to be in the next level of maturity, right? Depending on how you master your Saturn transits, right? If you're able to act, age graciously, or if you're just going to be outdated, that shows itself during the Saturn transits. So this is happening right now, right? For Biden, there's no surprises here. You can see that, I think, if you just follow the news. But shortly after, actually starting as well now and going then into hard aspect is this here, what you got here, Pluto square his moon, right? So the moon is not just, the people in a politician's chart. It can also be like popularity among the people. And Pluto is squaring his moon in April, right? Already starting now, but it's going to be exact in sometime around then. It's starting in, end of March and then going into April. It's exact in April. So he's basically going to have a very powerful kind of and visceral, deep reactions of almost of hate, being thrown at him, being almost of hate, right, being thrown at him, and him having to experience that, right, as you can see here. So with the Pluto square moon, right? So he's going to face a lot of public backlash, a lot of public hate, or rejection, and I don't think he's going to make it. I don't think he's going to survive this wave of public kind of dejection and rejection and hard, dark feelings coming against him from the public, right? So because this is what Pluto square moon means, it's going to be a very hard time, especially with public, especially, I mean, in the personal chart, if you're just looking at his personal transits, has a lot of other descriptions too, but they're not important right now. We're looking only at the political interpretation. So I don't think he will survive this. By May, I mean, survive. I don't mean he's going to necessarily, die now. That's God knows when he's going to actually pass on. But I mean, he's not going to survive it politically. So in May, by May, when this is in full aspect, I would wager to say that he's going to be out. He can, he's not going to survive this politically. He's not in a position to. So by May, at the very latest, probably April already, he's going to be out. Okay, so if Biden is out, what does that mean for what does that mean for the race? Before we look into that, what it means for his party, the Democrats, let's also take a look at his contender, Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, we have here his chart. Let's see, we got his chart here. Let's bring up let's bring up the chart itself first, and you can see his chart. Oh, don't move this too much. Okay, you can see his chart here. Okay, right. So Donald Trump. So this guy is a fighter. He's a warrior. He's got Mars on the ascendant, and ascendant on Regulus, which is the star of that gives things a lot of power. It's the royal star. It's the main royal star, Alpha Leonis, right? And that's where his Mars and his ascendant are. So this guy takes no shit from nobody. We know that already, right? And he's got the Jupiter trine with Sun, right? You see here. So the king, the big king, who's living big, and also he's got Sun with Uranus. So he's also a revolutionary, right? You might not have thought so when you saw him first on the shows and so on, but he's a revolutionary, right? He's a revolutionary of the entire system. He's there to change the system, right? And that's how people are seeing him increasingly as well. And he's got the moon opposition here in this, and that's playing into the Jupiter as well. It's a very powerful constellation here. Remember, the moon is in a politician's chart, their popularity, and Jupiter is here hitting this as well, right? With a sextile is in this constellation. So innovation, revolution, and popularity are in his chart. And on the downside, obviously, with Jupiter trine and moon, with Jupiter, you always have the downside of excess and exaggeration, of arrogance and being full of yourself and being haughty, right? And all of those things I think you have seen in Donald Trump on a personal level, right, as well, regardless of what his kind of historical role is, right? Okay, so now let's look at the transits. The transits is really where we're going to see what we can expect in this year. So when we look at the transits, we've got here, this is right now, you see this is current February, March. So you see you've got this beautiful conjunction coming up, the Jupiter-Uranus in May, and then shortly after that, right, sort of around when the public unrest starts. The public unrest, goes higher and really erupts everywhere in the U.S. with the Uranus squaring the U.S. moon. Right around that time, you have Jupiter going into his 10th house, right? So he's going to have an incredibly powerful time, an incredibly, the time of success, public success and public recognition, right? Jupiter goes into his 10th house, goes on his MC. So, brings expansion to his public image and to his public power, really, right? So, and then Jupiter goes, reaches basically his sun. You see here the sun, just about around the time of the election. You see here, Jupiter is on the sun. This is happening just around the time of the elections. So October into November, right? Jupiter is on the sun. Now, Jupiter on the sun, what does that mean? Jupiter on the sun is the time at which you have the greatest public recognition, the greatest ability to be seen, and get praise and get popularity. That's when you have the Jupiter transit on your sun. So since Donald Trump came into politics, I think it was 2016, this is going to be, if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be the first time that he has this transit. So he will reach his peak popularity in 2024, exactly around the time of the elections, right? Exactly around the time of the elections, Donald Trump is going to be at peak popularity, more popular than he's ever been before. That's clear. It's written very, very clearly in the astrological charts, right? Okay, so what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean that we are going to necessarily see Trump win? Well, as I said before, there is the possibility that there's going to be some unforeseen disruptions throughout the year to the very nature, to the very kind of capacity of the elections to even take place. Because, for instance, if you have a war breakout, or if you have a breakdown of the grid, the infrastructure, the electricity, if you have a combination of those two things, maybe either to foreign agents or through, whatever kind of disaster or a combination thereof, right? Any of those things would obviously call into question the possibility of an election even to take place, right? And if that was the case, then we could have a situation where Trump is at peak popularity around that time, but nonetheless doesn't become president, right? So this is a possibility as well. Now, that possibility, obviously, it wouldn't bode very, very well for the future of the United States as a stable system, right? And that's kind of, something that's, the possibility of that is written in the charts as well, because when you look at the charts again, you have here in 2025, right? Going into 2025, you have here the Saturn-Neptune conjunction coming up here, which is a global thing. We're going to talk about that later. It's a big marker for these next 3 big years of chaos that are coming, 25, 26, 27. But in the US chart, it's on the IC, the identity and the inner kind of, the foundations, the very foundations of the nation are going to go through this kind of phase of breakdown and confusions, right? Kind of dissolution. This is dissolution. Saturn with Neptune. This is the marker of dissolution, right? So dissolution and violent dissolution potentially, because that's in Aries, on the foundations of the nation, right? So there's obviously other ways that this energy can be lived or realized, right? They could be more mild, but definitely the possibility of civil war is very clearly in the charts, and that's in 2025, right? Like in 2025, we have a very strong marker for this. Okay, so, and then going into the following year. So, okay, so if, let's say, Trump is somehow blocked from riding that wave of popularity that he's very clearly going to have. And he's blocked from riding that wave of popularity into office through whatever reason, through whatever, activities of certain actors like the deep state and others, then, this is a potential outcome. Okay, that being said, let's look at who could actually come into place instead of Biden. Because if it's not going to be the elderly guy, then who actually could come, and take his place? And we have a couple of candidates here. Kamala Harris. I'm going to do this quickly right now, right? So in the interest of time, Kamala Harris. I don't think so. She's got Saturn in her 10th house right now, which, okay, I mean, it could be taking on responsibilities, but it's been there for some time, so it's not new there. Saturn has been transiting her 10th house for some time, and then Jupiter goes into her 12th, which is mostly about the time of public retreat, socially speaking, not being so much in the limelight. This is happening for the rest of the year, so no, I don't think so. And what about Michelle Obama? Michelle Obama is very interesting. There's some stories around her and the Obama family. We can use astrology to decode a lot of that about her personal life. And, there's all kinds of stories about, is Obama, has he done this or that, or what's their sexuality, or what's their involvement with various kind of things that happened along the way to people who were with them. We can use the astrology and decode all of that. If you're interested in that, drop some comments in below, and we're going to look into that in future. But just right now, I want to look into the political events, her political kind of future. And if you look at this, she's got Jupiter is here on her ascendant. You see this? Jupiter is on her ascendant, and starting in March, right? In March, you're going to see from March, Jupiter is going to be on her ascendant. Right, so she's going to step out and a lot in a big way, right? Step out in a big way, and then from that onward, we're going to get here Jupiter and Uranus, and with this conjunction that they're forming, this important innovative conjunction, they're going to make a trine to her Sun, right? So very empowering for her, very empowering position for her. Also, the transiting North Node is on her Jupiter this year as well. So this triggers some good luck, a lot of kind of fortunate events happening for her, right? And what else we got? A couple of other things happening in her chart, but she's got a pretty strong kind of time coming up for her personal for the development, for personal development, and professional development. And then she's got Uranus trine the Sun, where it could be, catapulting her into very unexpectedly into completely new things, right? This is the marker of being catapulted into unexpectedly into new positions. And that's happening over summer with her. So she's a strong candidate. She has a very strong chart for this, for this coming year. With regards to being a potential candidate for the Democrats, right? So who else? Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom, he's been talked about a lot. And this guy, he's interesting. He's got actually, he's an interesting case. He's got this guy is a smooth talker, right? He's a really smooth talker with the Libra Sun, and the way that he speaks in public and presents itself as this very charming guy who is about kind of bringing, making a nice figure, being a very presidential, but in reality the guy is about power, right? He's got Pluto on his ascendant, like smack on his ascendant, right? 20 with the same degree, Pluto on his ascendant, right? In this kind of harsh constellation here with this opposition. This guy is all about power, right? And he kind of also has this personal, wound about his power. Like he feels very easily hurt, right? And he feels very vulnerable about his power, and he's going to do anything for power, right? And he's got this, the Jupiter, the Pluto is actually here with Moon, so he can use his powerful presence to sway the people, like hypnotize the people, give like very hypnotic speeches, have a strong effect as a speaker, right? With the Mercury here as well in 2 and in Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto, which is on his ascendant, and the ascendant is Virgo, which again is ruled by Mercury, so they're in a double reception with each other. Okay, but I'm not going to talk too much about his chart. I want to actually give you a little bit of insight on his transits as well, what he's got coming up. Gavin Newsom. So Gavin Newsom, he's got in this year, he's got a really interesting situation coming up towards the end of the year, where Jupiter is going to be here squaring his Pluto and potentially leading him, and is on his MC, on his midhaven. So for him, going into the elections, similarly to Trump, Gavin Newsom also is going to have huge boosts of popularity and public recognition, very similar to Trump, just months before the elections. But at the same time, is going to square his Pluto here, as you can see. So he might do some actions that are very, let's say, grand or power hungry. And it's also opposing here his Mars, because this guy, the Pluto is also square his Mars natally, right? So he's a hard guy, a very ruthless guy when it comes to power, right? Super ruthless guy who will do anything for power. And with Jupiter being here with this triangle that you can see here, he's going to do some big and bold actions just in the buildup of the elections, which could be very unethical potentially, but which will bring him power, right? So this is the image that we're seeing here. Huge boost in popularity, right? And potentially actions that are unethical and that bring him power, right? This is the constellation that we see here for Gavin Newsom going into the elections. So this being the case, my bet is on Gavin Newsom taking this thing over for the Democrats, and then them doing whatever they think they have to do. Now, this whole outcome, the whole outcome of this story is vastly important for all of us, so we're going to keep observing it. This will not be my last video. There's going to be much more videos like this one where we will decode and unveil what's going on in politics in the world. Now, especially in this age that we're in, with all the uncertainty that surrounds us, with the risk of a global war rising, with the risk of massive inflation returning, of assets being in danger, or even lives being in danger, you can really benefit from being able to read the ancient language of the stars, which we can now unlock and uncode with the latest technologies and the latest discourses and narratives that allow us to understand the archetypal cosmology. So I invite you to be part of this journey. Make sure that you're subscribing and following and liking, sharing, telling me in the comments what else you want to see, what other videos you want to see. We can do more deep dives like this. We will do much more deep dives like this into global politics, into economics, into personal and spiritual development as well, because that's at the end of the day what everything centers on and what everything's about. But I look forward to having you on this journey with me, and I remain yours, Dr. V.